Hello and welcome back to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Today is Tuesday, May 27th. Hope everybody had a great Memorial Day weekend. Got a good show for you today. It's kind of a lull in college football, as pretty much everybody knows if you're a college football fan, but we're going to have some fun with it. Want to talk first about EA College Football 26, the cover stars just got announced. Going to dive into who exactly is that, who will we be seeing on our consoles very soon in the future. Also going to dive into Greg Sankey. Kind of went off in his opening press conference during SEC's spring meetings this week. We're going to dive into what exactly he said yesterday. We're also going to talk a little bit about the ACC. Go over some strengths of schedules, some programs that have really manageable schedules, others that, not so much. And then make sure you stick around for the end of the show. We're going to continue on with my Big Ten power rankings, kind of that upper to middle tier of the conference today. So we're going to dive into that. But before we get into anything, I want to remind everybody, this show is all about you. We love hearing your comments, your questions, your insights, your opinions, your hot takes. Whatever you got, we want to hear it. We want to make this show as interactive, as exciting as possible. Now, one easy way to do that, if you're on YouTube, you can use the Super Chat feature. All you have to do to use the Super Chat feature is click the $ at the bottom of the chat box, type in your message there, send that in, and this guarantees that your message gets on the air, gets read live. It's also just a great way to support our channel, support what we're trying to build here at GSMC. We couldn't do what we do without your ongoing support, and we're so grateful to have you here as a part of our community at the GSMC Podcast Network. Now, if YouTube's not your thing, Super Chat's not your thing, you can also go to gsmcpodcast.net to tip, donate, comment, question, whatever you want there. Again, that website is gsmcpodcast.net. Now, let's dive into one of my favorite things, video games. Gotta love the world of video games. And with EA returning its series last year of college football video games with College Football 2025 and allowing current players to be in the games, giving them compensation for their name, their image, their likeness. This has been something that we were kind of waiting to see. Who was going to be on the cover of 2026? And we got our answer in Alabama's Ryan Williams and Ohio State's Jeremiah Smith. Kind of a safe pick, I think, with EA, going with two kids who completely blew up the college football industry when they came in last year as true freshman wide receivers. Ryan Williams really with that big September kind of showcase, especially against Georgia in that game, had 6 catches, 177 yards, including that 75-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter to go ahead and give the Crimson Tide that lead there against Georgia. Jeremiah Smith, not to be outdone, 1,300 yards in his debut season in the college football world, en route to becoming Ohio State's number 1 wide receiver, becoming the go-to guy for Will Howard on their way to the national championship in 2024. It makes a lot of sense, right? I think to have these two guys, two of the absolute bona fide stars of college football. And actually, they almost teamed up in college. When they were both being recruited as 5-star wide receivers, they did cross paths at one point. In a recruiting event in Georgia, they were both there. And Ryan Williams kind of said he broached the idea of the two of them teaming up, saying, hey, I tried to get him. I was like, come on, let's go team up. Let's go somewhere. Let's tear up the college football world. He was like, And we kind of thought about it. Jeremiah Smith, too, he said it would have been crazy. I don't know how you stop that. And Ryan Williams kind of replied by saying, you can't. He's not wrong. If those two dudes were on the same college football team, that's one of the best passing attacks in the nation, easily. Just having one of those difference maker wide receivers in your room makes such a big difference when you're looking at your offensive output, when you're looking at kind of the stuff that you can do on the gridiron. Having at least one of those kind of go-to wide receivers is such a big bonus, and then you add 2 potentially into the same room. That's kind of a crazy concept to think about. If Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams actually did team up, what would that wide receiver room, what would that offense look like at either Alabama or Ohio State? But these are going to be your 2 guys on kind of the regular cover. The deluxe cover is a little different. This kind of got leaked to around the Rose Bowl, but there's about 20 guys, honestly. You have current players, Nick Singleton, Jeremiah Love, true freshman quarterback from Michigan, Bryce Underwood, which I kind of thought was an interesting one. Could that be foreshadowing for maybe college football 2028? I don't know. We could see. And then DJ Lagway's on it as well. You also have Caleb Downs, Sam Levitt, Cade Klubnik, a lot of quarterbacks, Garrett Nussmeier, Dylan Stewart from South Carolina. Then you got some coaches too. James Franklin, Kirby Smart, Marcus Freeman, Lane Kiffin, Dan Lanning, Kenny Dillingham, Ryan Day. And then you had the 3 kind of legends in Reggie Bush, Denard Shoelaces Robinson, and Tim Tebow, all on the cover as well, former cover athletes of past editions of the college football video game produced by EA Sports. We don't know what the game's finally going to look like. We don't know the final kind of reveals. Both Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams should guaranteed to be at least a 95, right? Jeremiah Smith, that was a guy that started at an 84, finished the year as a 90. I would be very shocked if he wasn't a 95 plus in this year's game. Ryan Williams, kind of the same trajectory, started out as an 82, finished as a 90. Ryan Williams, too. This is a guy you're going to want to play with if you're looking at potential dynamic offenses. Ryan Williams, 96 speed, 99 agility, 98 acceleration. I know, I'm kind of getting into the dorky stats of the video game world of college football, of football in general, but I don't know. It's kind of one of the things I like about football, about sports. I like video games, so it's kind of a fun one. Ryan Williams, that 96 speed, 99 acceleration, or 98 acceleration, 99 agility. Ooh, that's going to be a tough guy to stop in this video game. 2 guys, too, that kind of formed an interesting friendship. They don't play against each other normally. They don't really play in the same conference. They've seen each other's highlights, though. The comparisons that other people kind of make about the 2 of them, obviously having that dynamic 5-star freshman year where you come in and produce right away, that's something we don't really see a lot. And their experiences kind of mirror each other a little bit, I think. And they'll text each other after big games. I think that's kind of cool. Smith texted Ryan Williams after he had his game-winning touchdown against Georgia in September. Williams' favorite catch by Jeremiah Smith this year was his one-handed touchdown against Iowa. So these guys will text each other back and forth, too, and be like, hey, I saw that this week. Maybe I can do better. I'm sure there's a little back and forth, I would imagine, right? Kind of, again, in the unique position of already being among the best players in the country, despite being 18, 19 years old. Ryan Williams, for a good chunk of his freshman year, was 17 years old. Kid wasn't even legal as an adult, technically, but tearing up SEC defenses as one of the best guys in the country to do it, it's pretty impressive. Dane Brugler, too, from The Athletic, he said in December that if Jeremiah Smith had been draft eligible this year, he could have very likely competed with Travis Hunter to be the first non-quarterback drafted. Travis Hunter obviously ended up being drafted 2nd overall. That's pretty high praise for Jeremiah Smith. One thing to maybe look at here down the road is, do either of these 2 guys end up sitting out a college football season? I don't know. I think there's too much money to be lost out on at this point, but it's happened before. Steve Spurrier said that Jadeveon Clowney, there were people around him that advised him to sit out in 2013. Obviously, he still did play and still ended up going number 1 overall. But 12 years later, there's a lot of time there. Jeremiah Smith, or not Jeremiah, Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase sat out during 2020. Obviously, that's a different kind of situation with the COVID-19 pandemic, but still something to kind of monitor as a potential situation. Nick Bosa got hurt in September of his draft-eligible year, ended up sitting out the rest of the year, just got healthy, ended up being the second, third overall pick. These guys got asked about that too, and they're like, is there any chance you kind of sit out because you still have 2 years before you're even draft eligible? Jeremiah Smith's like, nah, I'm enjoying college. I'm not in any rush to go to the NFL, which, I mean, fair enough, dude. If you're the number one wide receiver on a national championship winning football team, especially at a place like Ohio State, I'm sure you're having a great time at college. One other kind of thing to look at, is there going to start being almost like a Madden curse where, we see that every year? That's kind of one of the big conspiracies, I guess, that if you're on the cover of Madden, it's just going to tank your career. I think that's kind of gone down by the wayside a little bit, just since we've seen like Pat Mahomes be on the cover and still be fine, Lamar Jackson still be fine. College football, Travis Hunter was on the cover last year. He went from being on the cover to winning the Heisman. Not bad. Are one of these two guys maybe going to follow that same trajectory? It's very possible. I mean, it's really hard to top a freshman season kind of like either of them had, but I think if anybody has the talent or the potential to do it, it's probably Jeremiah Smith or Ryan Williams. Honestly, either of them. I think Jeremiah Smith's a little more impressive of a prospect right now, just because he did a little more last year. 1,300 yards, kind of becoming that number one option pretty much right away for Ohio State on a team that still had Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate, Brandon Inniss, a lot of guys around Jeremiah Smith that are legitimate targets too. But he kind of surpassed all of them, kind of just took the reins of that number one wide receiver position and ran with it. That's a guy that he's very much a Heisman contender in the next couple of years. Could we see another wide receiver win the Heisman for the first time since Devontae Smith did it at Alabama? I think it's very possible in the next couple of years with guys like Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams, still in college football, still going to be stars. We're going to have to watch and see what they do in 2025, but I'm expecting great things from both of those guys. So right now, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the SEC, their conference meetings starting this week, and what Commissioner Greg Sankey said. But we're going to dive into all of that when we come back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Happy Tuesday. Today is May 27th. Hope everybody had a great Memorial Day weekend. Gonna dive into Greg Sankey and his comments earlier at the SEC conference meetings. But before I dive into that, I just want to remind everybody that this show, it's all about you. We want to hear whatever you're thinking. We want to hear your comments, your questions, your insights, your hot takes, your opinions. Whatever you got, we want to hear it. We want to make this show as interactive, as exciting as possible. Now, one easy way to do that, if you're on YouTube, you can use the Super Chat feature. To use the Super Chat feature, all you have to do is click the $sign at the bottom of the chat box, type in your message there, send that in, and this guarantees that your message gets on the air, gets read live. It's also just a great way to support our channel, support what we're trying to build here at GSMC. We couldn't do what we do without your ongoing support, and we're so grateful to have you here as part of our community at the GSMC Podcast Network. Now, let's dive into Greg Sankey. Greg Sankey, man, I get it. It was only a matter of time before the inevitable happened. Before somebody pushed him too far and he kind of lashed out. The desperate lash out, the defeated will try anything. Not this time, though. Not in this specific situation. Greg Sankey opened the SEC spring meetings on Monday with a near 45-minute press conference, most of which was kind of dominated by questions of the future of the college football playoff. What else would it be? Come on. We know what the story's going to be. And one kind of interesting thing he said, though, too, in his comments was that he said the SEC has no preference for a college football playoff format, but that he expected it to be a major topic of conversation during these next 3 days of meetings with athletic directors, coaches, university presidents, officials, the whole gaggle, the whole crew. This is going to be one of the big conversations. I kind of thought it was interesting, though, that he said that they don't have a preferred format right now. At first, when I heard that, I was kind of like, I don't know. I think that's maybe not true. But the more I think about it, the more I can kind of see what Greg Sankey's saying. And his frustration really kind of boiled over, and I think that kind of showed what he was trying to get at, to where he was basically saying, hey, we're not the ones pushing for all this change. Yes, we're one of the lead decision makers here, but we're not the ones that wanted to expand the playoff. We're not the ones that pushed for all this change. We're not the ones that tried to incorporate more into everything. We're not the ones that's pushing automatic bids, automatic buys. We're not doing that. The Big Ten is right now, but that's not us. Greg Sankey kind of said, one of his quotes was, I don't need lectures from others about the good of the game. Especially when, in his mind, this is the guy that's been working all along to save the Big 12 and the ACC. He was the one, if you look at it, that not long ago convinced his presidents in the SEC that a college football playoff was in the best interest of college football. Not an SEC playoff, not just their conference. A big one across the entire sport that was best for the interest of the game. Even though a lot of the SEC presidents were kind of unsure of college football playoff expansion in the first place. And he's the one working along with Tony Petitti right now from the Big Ten that was given all of the power in the college football playoff. Everybody else signed off and said, yep, here you go, Greg. Here you go, Tony. We're giving you the power. We're giving you the authority to kind of make these decisions. And including the Big 12 and the ACC commissioners who are now kind of complaining about it. So if you look at that, if you look at kind of their comments last week in the ACC and the Big 12, it seems like it's just kind of poking the bear. Just going at Greg Sankey, and there was going to be a response at some point. Greg Sankey, look at where we are. We're on the verge of the college football playoff becoming a 16-team format beginning in 2026. The desperate have now decided to speak up. Commissioners of the ACC, the Big 12, whose leagues aren't going to get similar access, more to that kind of point, similar revenue to the SEC, the Big Ten, those commissioners made statements to CBS Sports last week that looked kind of coordinated. Both said in part that the, quote, best interest of the sport was at the forefront of every decision that they've made relative to the college football playoff. That kind of didn't really sit well with Greg Sankey, the guy who was asked by the college football playoff board of directors to kind of build the first team, 12-team playoff years ago, then watched petty politics pretty much just keep delaying it for months and months and months. The ACC's part in the delay, that old alliance that was talked about with the Big Ten and the Pac-12 before the Pac-12 dissolved, ACC was involved in that. That was supposedly in the best interest of the sport too. The Big 12 and the ACC raiding the Mountain West in the American Athletic Conference. That was in the best interest of the sport as well, in their minds, in the ACC, the Big 12's minds. Greg Sankey kind of said, you can issue your press statements. I'm actually looking for ideas to move us forward right now. The SEC didn't need the playoff. That was for the good of the game. Sankey wasn't done there, though. He said, and this is basically for the first time since he was named commissioner 10 years ago in 2015, he kind of spoken with forceful tones. He kind of just unloaded here. He said for 10 years, he has spoken as the conference, really as the commissioner. It's kind of always been we, not me. But this was me. This was Greg Sankey talking as Greg Sankey. And he kind of said, one of his quotes was, you want to go inside what it's like to sit in this role. I think about the responsibility I have to our member institutions. I think about the rest of college football more broadly all the time. I'm open to ideas. He was discussing the college football playoff. He said, I'm open to ideas. There's just not a lot incoming. My phone's not ringing off the hook with, hey, here's another way to look at it. He's kind of saying, we're open for business. If you want to change this college football playoff format, give me another idea. Give me something that can work with how the landscape's going in this whole college football industry. It's kind of trending one way. Greg Sankey's saying, give me alternatives. Give me potentials to discuss, to bring to my member institutions, to bring to those decision makers. Let's give some other ideas. If you don't like this format, then say something. Then give me an alternative. Give me a different plan. That's pretty much what he's asking for right now. And this is Sankey. It's just more than the ACC and the Big 12 looking for more access. It's more than the current model. It's about Greg Sankey hearing explicitly one thing from presidents, athletic directors of these institutions, of these universities, and then dealing with the rest of college football on a completely different level. There's multiple layers to this job, and I, for one, do not envy what Greg Sankey has been trying to do and kind of reshape this entire college football landscape. And frankly, his presidents right now, they make all the decisions related to football. When it comes down to it, that's who's making decisions around these football programs. The presidents of these universities, of these institutions, none of them are really happy about how the college football playoff process, how this kind of format is starting to shake out. About the format, about allowing schools who they kind of believe are just hanging on to the SEC's financial coattails to kind of get into the playoff. If you look at it, last year, Indiana makes the college football playoff after beating just one team with a winning record. SMU makes the college football playoff after losing its conference championship. When Texas is a top 3 team, they have to play and they still have to play a first-round game. Tennessee is a top 7 team. They have to play a first-round game on the road. That doesn't look good for the SEC. If you're the SEC, looking at last year's playoff, it's not conducive to you. It's not helping you. If you're Greg Sankey, your main purpose is to help that conference and the institutions that are members of the Southeastern Conference. Georgia, Texas kind of getting messed over in last year's college football playoff. That's not conducive to the overall health of the SEC. We're really not that far removed from 2021, when the SEC kind of had their idea of having their own playoff separate of the college football, rest of the college football world. And the market for those games would be incredible. If you're looking at a TV deal for a potential SEC tournament, it would be really groundbreaking money. In other words, SEC, if they won, they can actually take their ball and go home. It's something that they have in their back pocket. yeah, you don't really want to pull that out. But in theory, that's a card that Greg Sankey has where if he wants, he can say, you know what, we're going to walk away from this. We don't like this deal that we've kind of helped shape. We're going to walk away from this. These meetings, though, kind of began with the backdrop of the SEC's seemingly never-ending move to 9 conference games. More now, it's kind of a financial lifeboat. And the SEC, or the ACC, the Big 12, their commissioners kind of having their own statements this week. Really probably wasn't the best time for them to kind of poke at Greg Sankey at the SEC and the Big 10. Greg Sankey kind of said, if you're really doing all this for the best of the game, all right, come talk to me then, or else don't shoot shots across the bow. That's kind of the vibe I was picking up from Greg Sankey and kind of his comments in his initial presser on Monday. We're going to see how this all shakes out. Will these kind of relationships keep deteriorating? Will they be able to come together and agree on a format for 2026 and beyond? What's going to happen? We're not really sure, but it's pretty clear that Greg Sankey is not super happy right now with kind of the entire landscape of the college football playoff and where it could potentially go. So right now, we're going to take another quick break on the show. When we come back, we're going to look at some ACC programs and look at strength of schedule. Some programs that may have an easier slate this year, others that are going to have a rough stretch for a while. But we're going to dive into that when we come back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network on this Tuesday, May 27th. Just talked a little bit about Greg Sankey. What was his kind of comments coming out of the SEC meetings this week? We're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about the ACC, one of Greg Sankey's kind of conferences that he's not super happy with right now. But I want to look at certain programs' strength of schedules in the ACC this year and kind of give a preview of why I think their season may go a certain way. And one of the teams I want to start with, they probably have one of the hardest schedules in the ACC. Poor Stanford. Cardinal, you're going to be in for a rough year this year. So first of all, you have your last matchup in rivalry week at home, but you got to play Notre Dame. And Notre Dame, depending on how the rest of their season goes, this could be a matchup where they really, really want this win. Stanford, I just don't think they have the talent this year. So you have Notre Dame at home. That's a loss. Then you have to go to Miami. Playing Miami, a much more talented program in Miami, completely across the country. That's a loss for Stanford. You do get Florida State at home. So that's a plus. You don't have to travel back to Tallahassee after already being in Miami. But Florida State, that's more of a toss-up. Could be a rough matchup, though. You have to go to SMU, to BYU as well. Two matchups that I am not favoring Stanford in. I think they're going to be really rough. Then you also have to go to Chapel Hill to play a Tar Heel team that nobody really knows what they're going to look like, honestly. You have to go to Virginia, which Virginia isn't the toughest place to play. Then you have a home game against Pitt, not bad. You have to go to Hawaii this year as well. A lot of travel for the Stanford Cardinal this season. Then you have Boston College at home, not bad. Cal at home in a very winnable rivalry game, but a game that honestly could go either way, and San Jose State. So you have a couple winnable matchups there. But going to Miami, to SMU, to BYU, to North Carolina, 4 really tough road trips for Stanford, and then also having Notre Dame at home to end your season. Not the way I would want to end if you're Stanford. This is going to be a rough year for the Cardinal. Kind of a transition year. Frank Reich taking over for only 2025. Going to be interesting to see how that kind of shakes out. But Stanford, I just don't think they're going to have the talent to compete this year. And you have some really rough road matchups that are not conducive to their schedule whatsoever. There's another program here that I'm really high on. Their schedule is not going to give them any favors this year. I don't know if the Syracuse Orange are going to be able to replicate their 10-win season from last year. Here's why. You have to play at Notre Dame November 22nd, so kind of when Notre Dame is really geared up towards the playoff. You have to play at Clemson, at Miami. You do have to play Tennessee as well. Tennessee, that's a neutral game, though that's one of the pluses for Syracuse here. However, it is in Atlanta. So, neutral site, yes, but in SEC territory, an easy trip for fans coming down from Knoxville for the Vols. It's going to be pretty much a road game. And then you have to go to Georgia Tech as well as to SMU. You do get Duke at home, but that's a tough matchup. You get North Carolina at home, another tough matchup. Boston College, Pitt, easier matchups. But pretty much 6 road games almost. You have 5 really difficult road games at Notre Dame, at Clemson, at Miami, at Georgia, at SMU. And then Tennessee is essentially a road matchup as well. Yes, it is a neutral site, but you're in Atlanta, which is only a few hours away from Knoxville. Easy trip for Volunteer fans. Probably are going to see a lot more Volunteer fans there than Syracuse Orange fans. So I'm going to count that as a road game too. So you have 6 road matchups against teams that all could potentially be ranked at some point throughout the season. You're also losing Kyle McCord, who threw for 4,000 yards last year. You're losing your leading wide receiver in Traver Pena, transferred to Penn State. You're also losing Rod Watson on the defensive line. Yes, I really like Syracuse. I like what Fran Brown has been building there. But 6 road games, essentially, against all potential top 25 opponents, that does not bode well for the future success of the Syracuse Orange football program. It's very possible that they can kind of go against my expectations here. I just think that even if you probably split those 3 games, that means you have to go perfect the rest of the season to win 9 games. That's going to be difficult to do for Syracuse. I think we probably wouldn't see a 7-win season, somewhere around there from them. Clemson, they're closer to the more difficult end of the spectrum in terms of ACC strength of schedule. A lot of that, I think, stems from their Week 1 matchup. Having LSU Week 1, you do play them at home, but that's a really difficult matchup. A team that has potential top 5 aspirations. Bringing back Garrett Nussmeier, really kind of reloading in multiple key positions across the board for LSU. It's a deep LSU team, and it's one that's going to be hungry coming into Death Valley, but this is going to be a tough matchup for Clemson. Clemson, though, they're in a really good spot in terms of returning roster production. You have one of the most experienced offensives coming back. Third-year starter Cade Klubnik, Bryant Wesco Jr., Antonio Williams at wide receiver. You have Gideon Davison, a really promising true freshman coming in at running back. 4 starters on the offensive line. A couple really key defensive pieces returning. So I think if they beat LSU, that's going to be a big kind of indication of how Clemson could do this year. you do have to go to South Carolina this year. That's going to be tough, especially after South Carolina won that matchup last year in Clemson. You have to play at Georgia Tech. I really think Georgia Tech's going to be plucky this year. Then you have to play at Louisville. That's going to be another difficult matchup. At North Carolina, I think will also be kind of a difficult matchup for Clemson. But if you're able to beat LSU, and then you're able to beat one of Georgia Tech, South Carolina, you're in a really good spot to win 10, 11 games right now for Clemson. Just kind of the way the roster is built, the way they're set up. Duke's another intriguing team. Now, Duke won 9 games last year. They also bring in a $4 million quarterback in Darian Mensah to kind of upgrade that room. So they're going to be interesting. But you have to go to Clemson. You have Illinois at home. Yes, it's at home, but Illinois is a potential top 15 team. I don't know if Duke can compete with them this year. I think Illinois might win that matchup. Then you have to play at Syracuse, which is going to be a tough game, at North Carolina, at Tulane. So you do have Georgia Tech at home too. But so more of their difficult matchups are at home. Illinois, Georgia Tech. You do have to go to Clemson. You have to go to Tulane, which I think is going to be tough. And Syracuse could be kind of a tricky matchup for Duke. But I think that's a manageable schedule for them. I think it's very realistic to see them win 9 games again this year. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibilities. Another team I think is kind of interesting is Georgia Tech. So Georgia Tech, you get Georgia at home and you get Clemson at home. Yes, those are 2 really difficult matchups for the Yellow Jackets, but having both of them at home this year, that's a really big plus. You do have to go to Colorado in kind of an interesting cross-conference matchup. You have to play at Duke, but then the rest of your games are pretty manageable. At North Carolina State could be kind of interesting, just depending on how the Wolfpack is this year. I think, though, Georgia Tech, they're in a really good spot to make some noise. Another team, another program that I think is in a really, really great spot is Louisville. Louisville, when you're looking at total strength of schedule in terms of if you ranked each team, if you say the number 1 team in the country, they get 1 point for being number 1. The number 136 team in the country gets 136. And then obviously the lowest total wins. So that's kind of how this strength of schedule worked. The lowest amount of points, that's the most difficult schedule because you're playing more top-ranked matchups. So Louisville, on that scale, they were 15 out of 17 in strength of schedule. You look at, they have Miami, so they have to go to Miami, to SMU, and to Virginia Tech. Those are kind of their biggest away matchups. You get Clemson at home, you get your rival Kentucky at home, and then pretty much every other matchup is really manageable for Louisville. You have Boston College at home, Cal at home, Virginia. Your out-of-conference schedule looks like James Madison, Bowling Green, Eastern Kentucky, all winnable matchups. And then your other road games you have at Pitt, at Virginia Tech. Those are all really manageable matchups. I think if you win 2 of the 3 in at Miami, Clemson at home, and at SMU, this is a Louisville program that's certainly in contention for an ACC championship, potentially double-digit wins. I think that's the kind of potential that this program has, and their schedule makes it really possible for that kind of outcome for them. You only have Miami, Clemson, SMU to play. In terms of kind of big-time ACC contenders, and going to Miami, to SMU, yes, that's going to be tough. I think that Louisville can win at least one of those matchups. And then getting Clemson at home, if they're playing really well, that matchup's November 14th, late in the season. If Louisville's playing well, I think that's a matchup that they can certainly win at home against Clemson. They have the talent to do it. If they're playing with confidence at that point in the season, it's very possible. But look out for Louisville this year. I think they're really intriguing as kind of a sleeper ACC team. So right now, we're going to take another quick break on the show. When we come back, we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about two Big Ten programs in Ohio State, Penn State. Who has the edge? We're going to discuss when we come back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Today is Tuesday, May 27th. Had a good show for you so far. We're going to keep going, keep pushing on. We're going to talk Penn State, Ohio State. Who's more likely to win a Big Ten championship, win a national championship this year? Who's more likely to be standing when the season ends next year in 2025-2026, I guess, in January? But who's more likely to still be standing? Is it the Buckeyes? Is it the Nittany Lions? We're going to dive into it. So when you're looking at quarterback, Penn State, I think, has an easy advantage here over Ohio State. Ohio State losing Will Howard, their transfer that played for them last season, replacing him with most likely going to be Julian Sand, a guy that does have a lot of potential, does have a lot of upside. Former five-star quarterback, transferred from Alabama after Nick Saban retired, kind of sat all of last season just learning behind Will Howard, learning the offense. He should take control this year. Lincoln Keenholz kind of sounds like is still in competition, but if I had to bet, I would say this is Julian Sand's job. I think that just kind of seems how it's going to be played out. However, though, when you look on the other side for Penn State, yes, there's Julian Sand, but there's a guy in Drew Aller, a former five-star quarterback in his own right, but a guy that's coming into his third year as a starter at Penn State, really should be growing into his own this year. Had a much stronger 2024 campaign than he did in 2023, kind of helped cut down on some of his bad decision-making, showed a little more confidence in his arm, in his pass-throwing abilities. This is a guy, though, that I think with another year as the starter, another year of confidence, and you still have your offensive coordinator there, you still have some of your weapons around you. Drew Aller, this is your time. You really got to put it all together this year and showcase what makes you so tantalizing as an NFL prospect. 6'5", 235, can throw the ball 75 yards, can scramble when needed, smart quarterback, a guy that's just got to cut down on those poor decisions sometimes and settle down. Seems to get a little rattled at times, especially in big-time matchups. That's going to be one of the things for Drew Aller. Can he finish this year? He had that crucial interception in the semifinal against Notre Dame that kind of sealed Penn State's season. Can he not do that this year? Can he lead Penn State on a game-winning drive to beat Ohio State, to beat a team of that caliber? We're going to have to wait and see. It's going to be on Drew Aller this year, though. But I think when you're looking at the comparison between him and Julian Sand, this is a clear win for Penn State, just like the backfield is too here. This is a clear win for Penn State as well. Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, the dynamic duo returning, probably the best backfield in the country. I think these two guys are two of the top 5 running backs in the country, regardless of where they play. Both ran for over 1,000 yards last year. Both kind of have a different abilities to them. Nick Singleton, much more of kind of a dynamic threat. Katron Allen, punisher, bruising runner, but a guy that wears defenses down. I think they're the best 1-2 punch in the country. Ohio State, they're going to be hurting this year after losing Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson. You have James Peoples, sophomore, should kind of step up. I think C.J. Donaldson is going to be in the mix too. Watch out for freshman Bo Jackson, coming out of Cleveland via SJ, a guy that's really got a lot of potential at the running back position, but this is a young, inexperienced room for the Buckeyes. I think it goes to Penn State again. See, here's where the tide turns, though, in pass catching. Ohio State, you have one of the best pass catching units in the country returning, and Penn State, still another year of question marks there. Jeremiah Smith is back. Carnell Tate is back. Brandon Inniss, Mylan Graham, all former 5-star wideouts, all guys that are super impressive, kind of going to round out that wide receiver room. Then you also bring in Max Clare from Purdue. Big-time transfer addition, a guy that kind of led Purdue's offense last year as pretty much their only legitimate receiving option. Should have a lot more room to operate for Ohio State when you have guys like Jeremiah Smith, like Carnell Tate, Brandon Inniss on the outside. This is a guy in Max Clare that's going to feast across the middle of the field, big-time red zone threat, a guy that's really going to have... I would not be surprised if his yards per target goes way up, or yards per reception, whatever one. It's going to go way up, because this is going to be a guy that's going to catch 15, 20-yard passes across the middle. That's going to be wide open because of what those other receivers can do for Ohio State. Penn State, this is much more a question mark. You lose Tyler Warren. That's obviously your biggest loss. You lose Harrison Wallace to Ole Miss. Lose a couple others. Only Liam Clifford returns. You do bring in Devontae Ross from Troy, Kyron Hudson from USC, and then you bring in Traber Pena from Syracuse. Traber Pena, that's going to be your main guy, it sounds like. A guy that's going to be a 5th, 6th-year player in college. Had 980 receiving yards last year, was kind of Kyle McCord's go-to option for the Syracuse Orange. Should kind of take over that role for Penn State and at least give Drew Aller somebody that he can check the ball down to when it kind of gets all messed up. But I'm giving this one to Ohio State. I think that's the easy option. Offensive line, I think this is more of a toss-up. You have Carson Hinsman, Tegra Shabola returning for Ohio State, Ethan Onainwa coming in at left tackle from Bryce. Configuration is going to kind of depend on a couple of different guys. I think Penn State, though, there's a lot more continuity here. So I'd probably give this to Penn State. This is going to be one of the strengths of this 2025 Nittany Lion team. You still have Nick Dawkins, Drew Shelton, Vega Ioane, Anthony Donko, Nolan Rucci, all got a ton of experience last year. All really had big-time production for the Nittany Lions. But guys that are going to step right in to those starting roles still have a lot of continuity there. This is a unit that's meshed well, that's played together for a long time. I think Penn State, this is the easy win too. Their offensive line gets the edge here. D-line, a little more of a question mark. Ohio State, losing Jack Sawyer, losing JT Tuimoloau, they're going to need reinforcements. Caden Curry's going to take over one of these spots. And then you bring in Bo Atkinson from North Carolina, the Tar Heels leading rusher last year, or pass rusher last year, a guy that should really kind of step into a bigger role. And then Penn State, you're losing Abdul Carter. Pretty big loss there, number 3rd overall pick to the New York Giants, a guy that could do a whole lot for them on the defensive line. But not all is lost. You still have Danny Dennis-Sutton coming back, guy that had 8.5 sacks last year, 13 tackles for loss, and really stepped up his play to play his best during their college football playoff run. That's going to be the guy that's going to anchor this Nittany Lion defensive line. It is important to note, too, that Tom Allen is out as defensive coordinator, and in comes Jim Knowles, replacing him as a Penn State Nittany Lions defensive coordinator. Jim Knowles coming in from Ohio State. That was a big addition. And a big loss for the Buckeyes, a big pickup for the Nittany Lions. You also have Zariah Fisher still around for the Nittany Lions. Guy that could factor in if he's healthy, kind of missed most of 2024. D-tackle then, you got Zane Durant coming back. He had a big 24 season, 42 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. There's a couple different guys kind of going to compete, but Danny Dennis-Sutton, Zane Durant returning to kind of anchor that D-line. Those are big wins. If you look at the rest then, Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs, 2 stars returning for Ohio State at linebacker, safety, respectively. And then you have Davison and Benson, Jermaine Matthews kind of locking up the corner spots. So secondary for Ohio State kind of looks pretty settled. Linebacker looks a little more settled for Penn State right now. Don DeLuca, Tony Rojas, both returning after starting last year. Tony Rojas kind of struggled at times, but definitely a guy that could be a bounce-back candidate, a guy that could kind of showcase what he can do at full potential, at full health. Cornerback room is very deep. You're losing Jalen Kimber, but there's a couple different guys that are all kind of in contention. A.J. Harris should really lock up one cornerback spot. And then Jalen Reed, Kevin Winston are both going to be on at safety. So Zakee Wheatley coming in, probably going to take over one role. DeJuan Lane could also start after having a pretty solid role as a true freshman, but that's going to be kind of a toss-up. When you look, though, at, I think, the overall makeup of these two programs, I think Penn State has the edge right now. Ohio State, yes, they're deep in certain spots. Oh, wide receiver, really, really deep room. Cornerback, safety, kind of some of those positions for them. Super deep, talented rooms. But when you look top to bottom, when you look at returning guys, when you look at who's still there, I think it's Penn State. You still have a Greer quarterback. You still have probably the best backfield in the country. You have one of the better O-line units in the Big Ten, if not throughout the nation. You have 2 guys on defensive line that are really big difference makers returning in Danny Dennis-Sutton and Zane Durant. You have 2 starting linebackers returning. You have a couple of your secondary guys returning. This is a deep Penn State team. It's an experienced Penn State team. And that's one that could really make some noise this year and potentially make a college football playoff run. So right now, we're going to take our last break of the show. When we come back, we're going to continue on the Big Ten theme, and we're going to continue on with my Big Ten rankings. So stick around. We'll be right back on the GSMC College Football Podcast. Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Today is Tuesday, May 27th. Gonna finish off our show by continuing on that Big Ten theme. We're gonna continue on with my rankings, kind of that upper middle tier today. So we got through 18 to 10 the past few days. We're gonna start off with number 9, and I think it's the Nebraska Cornhuskers. So Matt Rule kind of seems like he's starting to build Nebraska up in the right direction. It's not happening overnight. They were more competitive in 2024, but I think this year is kind of the year that we really want to see some progress out of this Cornhusker squad under Matt Rule. This is kind of the time for them to start notching some big-time conference wins over some bigger opponents. I think if they don't take a leap forward this year, this 2025 season, it's going to be a little disappointing. And Nebraska brought in some guys to kind of try to help quarterback Dylan Raiola coming into his sophomore year. One of those guys is Dane Key. Dane Key coming in from Kentucky. He's kind of lived up to the early building. A guy that is projected to be one of the leaders in the 2025 locker room, of that wide receiver room, odds-on favorite to kind of lead the Big Red in receiving this year. Dane Key is going to be one of those big-time guys for Nebraska. Another wideout to kind of help Dylan Raiola, Isaiah Hunter. Like him, Hunter coming in from Cal is projected to start right now and play a solid role for the Cornhuskers in 2025. A lot of early reports on Hunter kind of indicate that he's a really fierce competitor. He's not afraid to kind of get in the defense's face, even in practice. That's something that kind of shows your competitive spirit, kind of showcases who you are. And Isaiah Hunter, obviously, definitely got that little kind of drive, that fire, that competition, that competitive spirit that you want out of a wideout. Then you bring in some O-linemen, too, to kind of help protect your young quarterback in Dylan Raiola. Elijah Pritchett, a guy coming in from Alabama, one of the biggest portal acquisitions for Nebraska, projected to be Nebraska's starter at left tackle currently, and from pretty much all reports, all indications, had a really strong spring as well. So the Cornhuskers are expecting big things out of Elijah Pritchett in protecting their quarterback Dylan Raiola on his blind side. Another guy, too, that they bring in is Rocco Spindler. Rocco Spindler, guy from Notre Dame, that is pretty much another big-time significant offseason addition on that offensive line, fortifying the trenches for the Cornhuskers. A guy that started the past 2 seasons for Notre Dame and pretty much should step right into a starting role in 2025 for Nebraska. A guy that is plug-and-play at right guard, really solid addition, going to be at the minimum a very solid starter for Nebraska, a guy that's not going to mess up a lot, going to give you really decent protection at the minimum. Bring in Deshaun McCullough, a kind of edge linebacker hybrid, too, from Oklahoma. This another high-value transfer portal addition, a guy that's really got the ability to play at all 3 levels of the football field. Projects to be more of a hybrid linebacker kind of edge type role in 2025. Him, Willis McGahee IV, they're really kind of going to be the 2 guys that are going to be big for Nebraska in that pass rushing area. Then you have Marquise Watson-Trent coming in, reigning Sun Belt Defensive Player of the Year, and a guy that's going to start for Nebraska at linebacker, could be their leading tackler very well in 2025. An addition that kind of under the radar, but could end up looking like one of the better ones when everything's said and done in 2025 in Marquise Watson-Trent. Another guy, Andrew Marshall, coming in from Idaho. Sneaky good addition for Nebraska. Best cornerback in the Big Sky last year. A guy that is in a great spot to win a starting job at Nebraska and could really kind of showcase what made him the best corner in the Big Sky last year if he's able to get one of those bigger roles. But Nebraska, they have the talent. They have now made it to a bowl game. They're just looking to take that next step. You bring in Dana Holgerson as well as the offensive coordinator. It's going to be interesting. Dylan Raiola had a lot of ups and downs last year, but if he can kind of make that next step, make that transition, this could be a sneaky good Nebraska team. But I'm just not ready to rank them that high yet. I think USC is probably 8. I think they're probably ahead of them. USC, they were hyped as, the big addition to the Big Ten coming from the Pac-12. Oregon's kind of taken that. They've kind of taken it and ran with it. They stole that hype right out of the gate. What can Lincoln Riley and the Trojans do to regain it? Well, start winning some games, first of all. The world kind of expected USC to kind of just vault to the top of the Big Ten, and that really hasn't happened. But this group is deep, especially in certain positions. Running back is one of the groups where it's probably as deep as we've ever seen during Lincoln Riley's tenure. 5 scholarship players. Who's going to step into the lead role, though? That's kind of the big question mark. You have Eli Sanders coming in from New Mexico, who rushed for 1,000 yards last year, 9 touchdowns, and was the most productive player at the FBS level. A lot of optimism about JUCO transfer Wayman Jordan. Then you have Brian Jackson. You have Marion Peterson, 2 younger kids who could kind of get reps too, who both received extended action in the Las Vegas Bowl this year, could potentially get more playing time in 2025. There's certainly kind of a talent. It's just a little harder to kind of forecast who's going to be that number one guy this year. In years past, you just kind of earmark, oh, it's going to be Marshawn Lloyd. It's going to be Travis Dye. That's not going to be the case this year for USC. It's going to be interesting. Then you have a really productive duo and Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane coming in at wide receiver. Two guys that those are going to be your top two guys. The depth behind them is it's a little questionable, but you have two wideouts that are really solid to give Jordan Maeva a decent target. All eyes on the defensive line are going to be on Jakeem Stewart, true freshman, one of the biggest recruiting wins in Lincoln Riley's tenure at USC. 6'6", 290, a guy that's listed as a defensive end, but Danton Lynn, the defensive coordinator, kind of said that he has the potential to line up at multiple positions pretty much anywhere across the football field. The spring's kind of where we're going to start learning where he'll fit best, pretty much working in mostly a defensive end, but we'll see what they do with Jakeem Stewart, a guy that really they can mold into anything. He's that good of an athlete. You also have Keyshawn Silver, a big addition in the middle of that defensive line, who's a 6'4", 330 D lineman. Really kind of gives them the size that USC has desperately needed and lacked on the front seven for years now. And if they want to compete in the Big Ten, they need a big-time, big space-eating defensive tackle. That's just kind of somebody you need in the Big Ten, especially with the running offenses that we see a lot of times. Not going to be a quick twitch penetrator, much more of a space eater, but you need that role. Secondary is going to be interesting. USC lost 4 of 5 guys in their backfield. Starting Kamari Ramsey, that's the best returning player in the secondary, the only starter that's returning. NC State transfer Bishop Fitzgerald, he could factor in for a safety starting role. Corner and nickel are much more of a question. DJ Harvey coming in from San Jose State is probably going to get one role. Then that other kind of 2 spots are really up for grabs. There's a couple different guys. One question mark I have here is R.J. Sermons. Will R.J. Sermons, who just recently reclassified to 2025 and will now join USC this year, number 28 player in the 26 class previously at cornerback, will he be able to kind of push for early playing time in a position that's wide open right now for the Trojans? I think it's very possible. Now, number 7, I think it's the Iowa Hawkeyes. I didn't really know where to put Iowa. They're kind of interesting. Iowa, though, they have an offense now. Iowa, for the first time in 25 years, pretty much, has an offense. Brian Ferentz finally gone last year. Iowa's offense averaged 28 points per game last year. Don't tell anybody. 28 points per game. Will it continue this year? We're going to have to find out. Kirk Ferentz, though, his teams, he always gets the most out of his teams. If anybody can do it, it's Kirk Ferentz. Iowa's always a tough out. Their top 9 tacklers last year who were eligible to return all are back with the program. That's really big. You did lose a lot of production just in terms of that kind of category. On the defensive side of the ball especially, you also lose Caleb Johnson at running back. That was kind of your heart and soul of your rushing attack. And your running backs coach, Liddell Betts, also left. But Iowa's still returning more than 800 rushing yards from last season, combined between 3 runners in Kamari Moulton, Jason Patterson, and Terrell Washington Jr. Those guys all combined for over 800. So you still have some returning production at least. 2 of your top receivers are gone, in Luke Lachey and Caleb Johnson, but you still bring back 9 of your top 12 players in that category in terms of receptions, so that's a win. You also had Logan Jones, multi-year starter on the offensive line, forego the NFL draft, return to the Hawkeyes for another season, and your special teams unit retain their starting kicker and their starting punter, as well as their return specialist in Caden Wetchen, who last season was the most outstanding return specialist in college football. So that's a lot of continuity coming back. Iowa's always going to be one of those plucky programs. Not a lot of people leave. Not a lot of people transfer in. But they're going to be tough. You also bring in Mark Gronowski at quarterback, a guy that won 2 national championships at South Dakota State, one of the most accomplished FCS quarterbacks ever. I'm interested to see how that's going to translate to the FBS level. Is this a guy where he's just a baller wherever he goes? We're going to find out. I'm really curious on Mark Gronowski, though, and kind of how that's all going to shake out, where he's going to end up, what's going to happen with the Iowa offense. Is there actually going to be an Iowa offense this year? We didn't see one pretty much every year until last season, and now you're losing your leading rusher, you're losing your top tight ends, a couple other guys, and bringing in a new quarterback who is one of the most productive quarterbacks ever at the FCS level, but we haven't seen it at this level. We haven't seen it at the Big Ten level. Will that make any difference? Will that kind of affect his play? Or will this be a guy that just comes in and really lights up the college football world and kind of launches Iowa on a much higher trajectory than anybody's really giving them right now? I think that's also a possibility. We're just going to have to wait and find out and see how it all plays out. But Iowa, you may have an offense now, and it's kind of fun. So with that, we're going to end our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Please remember to subscribe, like, and follow the show. And if you want, you can also go to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or Twitter for even more sports content, more sports updates that you love. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to